Developing a country and making sure that every citizen has an opportunity, it is the hardest thing. So when you look at Kenya, this country needs value-based leadership, a leadership that respects values like integrity, values like honesty. That has been missing in Kenya for the longest. Nobody wants to be transparent. Nobody wants to be accountable. Kindly allow me to address you just in an audio because I am in a place where I can record a video. In a TV interview, maybe you watched it, Kalonzo mentioned specific and important issues that I feel we should examine further. Everyone remembers General Ogolla, and this was someone that was respected in the army, and during his time, he exercised good leadership. He exuded excellence and confidence. So the unfortunate happened, and all of us know that it was an accident. But Kalonzo believes otherwise. Hata before we get to the issue of, General Ogolla, Kalonzo raised an important issue where he says, as the opposition, there is a move by the government to monitor their movements. And he gave an example that is sort of interesting, and you should take a listen.
I'll give you the most recent example of how Kenya is becoming a police state. Today in Githiga, for the first time since I went into public leadership, a police officer in uniform, full uniform, and I really thanked him, comes to that function and he's taking photographs. One corner there, mimi na Eugene, engine pale, and then when he asked him, he said, it is that photo is required by his commanders. Commander, what does that tell you? That we cannot even genuinely go and enjoy company in a church service without being photographed by the police? But having said that, and I thank that officer because he was very, very sincere. I hope they don't victimize him. I wish others as transparent as him, saying it's required of us to know nani amekuja huku. All right?
If truly it happened as Kalonzo puts it, it is unfortunate because the police is expected to be independent and ensure that security is provided for all and sundry. But also the question I should ask, why should a police officer, perhaps in uniform, stand somewhere so openly and start taking photos and give that kind of explanation? I have a feeling that if the police want to take photos of the united opposition or these other people on this side of the political aisle, the police wouldn't do it so openly. Instead, they can send a police officer in civilian, to go somewhere and take photos like any other Kenyan without necessarily exposing themselves, to a level someone can identify them as police. But again, I can't in totality refuse or undermine what Kalonzo says. It could be factual because, as we've always said, that Kalonzo is someone who is always true to his word. So likely he is honest here. And as I mentioned, Kamili happened hivyo, then this is so unfortunate because we expect the police to make sure that everyone runs their business, without interference, as long as they're not breaking any law. Now, this is more disturbing. Kalonzo has been making this claim. It is not the first time Kalonzo has been going public with this assertion that General Ogolla, in Kalonzo's words, was taken out.
But having said that, we have a very professional army. Indeed, I hold the view that please, William Ruto, mess around with everything else, but don't mess around with Tonje rules, which governs succession in the military. Of course, I know there are attempts to do certain things. I maintain General Ogolla was taken out. Because how do you fly commander of Kenya's defense forces in an 80-year-old aircraft to go and inspect a primary school which was under construction in a military invested, bandit invested area?
The Kenyan military for sure has maintained professionalism, excellence and independence. And this is something that Kenya should always protect. And it is true that Kenya has these rules that guide succession in the armed forces, and these must always be protected. And looking at how things are, President Ruto has committed to making sure that the military remains independent. However, this claim from Kalonzo regarding the issue of General Ogolla is disturbing, because what we all understand, as the public, is that General Ogolla was traveling based on public knowledge we have. He was going to one of the areas in the Rift Valley to inspect a project that was being done by the military. And this was something that he wasn't doing for the first time. General Ogolla was always active, and being on the ground was something that was guiding him. In this case, being on the ground means that you don't just stay in office. Instead, as a leader, you move around to make sure that everything is running well. And this is something, as I mentioned, that was, commonplace in his mode of operations as CDF. And also, we all know that General Ogolla was a minimalist. He wasn't someone that would always, want his way. There's something very interesting. When I look at Kenyans, I find them as people who'd always want, to show this opulence, that once you hold office, you just have to use resources at your beck and call. That you can always be this opulent. You don't have to care about, the public. So when people saw Ogolla flying such, a chopper that is as old as 80 years, as Kalonzo says, people feel that that wasn't something that a general should do. And remember, this is a chopper that has been operational. So meaning any military officer would use it. So if the general used it, it means it was being maintained. And expecting a general only to fly in a chopper that was made, let's say, last year or a few years ago, is just a show of opulence that is commonplace in our public sector, where people just want to use resources anyhow. But General Ogolla wasn't that person. For General Ogolla, as I mentioned, he was a minimalist. He wasn't someone that would want to use public resources anyhow. He would always use what is available, as long as it can enable him to do what he's supposed to do. So flying in that chopper wasn't something that was organized so that eventually whoever wanted him eliminated or taken out could execute what he intended to do. I doubt if that is the case. However, I am not privy to any other information. But for Kalonzo coming out to maintain that General Ogolla was taken out without, providing evidence that is credible, doesn't really make sense. If truly he knows that General Ogolla was taken out, I have a feeling that it would make sense if he reports that issue, to the police for further investigation, because that kind of allegation, puts the public in a position where people have to rethink how they even associate with government, because we have a feeling that the government should serve people. So when a leader of Kalonzo's stature makes such a claim and continues to stand by it, it only makes sense if it provides more evidence. I also understand that Kalonzo is someone who has served in high-ranking, offices in this country, and he could be having more information. And also, when I look at Kalonzo as a politician, he could be making a guess like any other person. Perhaps he has analyzed this situation, considering that, cases of taking out, they're not that new, since independence. But what I feel is that if Kalonzo is certain that whatever claim he's making has credible evidence, it only makes sense if he provides such information to the police so that the public can know what really happened, because people are really interested in knowing what happened. All in all, Kalonzo remains a politician, and we all know that in 2027 it will be Kalonzo and Ruto. So these two would definitely be front runners, and they have to sort of dig out that from each other so that the public can see who is better. But again, the issue of between Ruto and Kalonzo, who is better, we shall leave it to voters. But from my analysis, I've maintained that President Ruto is likely to be re-elected. But that one doesn't mean that Kalonzo is not a good leader, because in most cases I've said this, Kalonzo is a great leader. I can't deny that. Kalonzo is a leader who upholds integrity. But you see, when it comes to politics, it is something different. Because if you ask yourself, are Kenyans ready to elect leaders who can ensure there is transparency and accountability? There's a big question that Kenyans should answer. Because for me, I may perhaps be having a different opinion, such as Kalonzo being a better president if he's given an opportunity, but the public may not necessarily agree to that. Because politics in Kenya, sometimes it's not agenda based. People can just vote for someone because of, perception, because of mobilization, or because of handouts, not necessarily because this person can be a good leader. So when I say President Ruto is going to win in 2027, I don't mean that because he's a good leader. It could be because Kenyans are just being Kenyans, where they're not ready for change. So if Kenyans are not ready for change, why should I then say Kalonzo will win? Should just say things the way they are. But what do you think about these claims Kalonzo has made?